Commander Riven Thorn stared at the holographic display hovering above the control deck, his eyes tracing the alien fleet's trajectory. "Looks like they're coming in for a friendly chat," he muttered, tapping a console with the grace of someone who'd done it 1,000 times and still found the interface annoyingly optimistic. Lieutenant Jax Voss, leaning against the bulkhead with the casual insolence of a man who'd been court-martialed thrice and learned nothing from it, snorted. "Yeah, if by chat you mean wipe us out faster than a bureaucrat at Happy Ior." The control room of the solar farm, officially known as the Solar Defense Array, was a symphony of flashing lights and frenetic activity. Technicians bustled about like caffeinated ants, occasionally swearing at screens that refused to cooperate. The air hummed with the kind of tension usually reserved for tax audits or blind dates. Riven rubbed his temples, which had been throbbing since the aliens first appeared on their sensors. They were from a star system with a name too long and pretentious for anyone to care about, a reputation for turning planets into historical footnotes, and absolutely no sense of humor. "So, what's the plan, boss?" Voss asked, flipping a pen in the air and catching it without looking, a trick that was either impressive or annoying, depending on your mood. "Well, Jax," Riven replied, voice laced with the kind of sarcasm that could strip paint, "I was thinking we could invite them over for tea and crumpets, discuss our differences like civilized beings, maybe swap some recipes." Voss grinned. "Sounds like a plan. I'll set the table." Commander Riven had never been one for niceties or diplomatic crap. When Earth decided it needed a safeguard against the unknown horrors of the universe, weaponizing their massive solar arrays seemed like the kind of paranoid genius only humans could concoct. And now, facing an armada of alien ships, it felt about as comforting as a wet blanket in a snowstorm. The control deck's main screen flickered, casting a pallid glow over the crew's faces, which were set in various degrees of grim determination or outright terror, the two expressions the universe had decided were humanity's default settings. "Command wants to know if we're ready," said a voice from the intercom. It belonged to Chief Engineer Mara Lennox, whose job was to ensure everything worked when it needed to and fix it when it inevitably didn't. "Tell them we're as ready as a chicken at a Fox convention," Riven barked back. Mara's chuckle was tinny through the speaker. "Copy that, Commander. I'll make sure all systems are go for our big fiery handshake." Riven turned to the crew. "All right, people, listen up. We've got a bunch of alien ships heading our way, and they're not here to sell cookies. We need that superlaser fully charged and aimed, and I don't want excuses." His eyes swept over the room, daring anyone to question the obvious insanity of their situation. "What if they just want directions?" piped up a young ensign, his voice cracking with the kind of naive hope that only someone who'd never met a tax collector could muster. Voss laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Yeah, sure, kid. Maybe they've just come to do some sightseeing, catch our lovely smog and oceans of plastic." Riven shook his head. "Ensign, the only directions they need are straight back to whatever hellhole spawned them," he said. "Now, let's get to it. We've got a galaxy to save, or at least make a big enough explosion to be remembered by." The superlaser, a beast of a contraption, sat snug in the belly of the solar farm, a testament to humankind's penchant for solving existential threats with brute force and a flagrant disregard for subtlety. Designed to harness the power of the sun itself, it was the kind of weapon that made you wish you'd invested in sunglasses. As the crew busied themselves with last-minute checks, Riven paced the deck, reflecting on the madness of it all. "How did we get here?" he mused aloud. "On the brink of annihilation, hoping our giant flashlight scares off the neighborhood bullies." "I'd say it was our winning personality and charm," Mara chimed in over the comms. "But we both know that'd be a lie." Riven grinned. "Yeah, well, let's hope they don't like surprises." Outside, the vast expanse of space stretched like an indifferent void, dotted with stars that had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. Today, Those stars bore silent witness to humanity's latest attempt to avoid joining that cosmic footnote. "They're getting closer," Voss said, nodding at the data streaming across his console. "ETA 5 minutes. Great," Riven replied. "Just enough time to regret every life choice that led me to this moment." The room fell silent, save for the persistent hum of machinery and the occasional nervous cough. Riven knew they all felt it, the creeping dread that comes with facing the unknown armed only with hope and a weapon of untested proportions. "All systems are green," Mara announced. "Solar charge is at 100%. Ready when you are, Commander." Riven took a deep breath. "All right, folks. Let's show them what happens when you mess with the neighborhood. Engage the superlaser." The room held its collective breath as the order crossed to Mara's station. A moment later, the solar farm shuddered with the release of pent-up energy. The superlaser burst forth, a concentrated beam of light so intense it could melt through any alien pretensions of superiority like a blowtorch through butter. "Direct hit," Voss exclaimed, eyes glued to the screens. "Looks like we got their attention." Riven nodded, watching the alien ship scramble like ants doused with boiling water. "Good. Now let's see if they brought their sunscreen." The minutes dragged on, each one bringing the alien fleet closer. The crew watched, equal parts fascinated and horrified as the enemy ships began to regroup, their intentions as clear as a politician's promise. "Looks like they're gearing up to return the favor," Voss noted, his tone a mix of admiration and resignation. Riven ran a hand through his hair, now damp with sweat. "Well, guess it's time to find out if our shields are worth the budget cuts we made to fund this thing." The first shots rang out, alien energy weapons slicing through the void with surgical precision. The solar defense array trembled under the impact, alarms blaring like a symphony of impending doom. "Shields holding," Mara reported, though her voice betrayed a hint of doubt. Riven forced a smile. "See. Told you it was a good idea to skip on the office plants and invest in shield generators." They exchanged glances, grim, determined, yet with a spark of defiance. Humanity might be cornered, but they weren't going down without a fight, not while they had breath and a ship that could turn sunshine into death rays. "Come on, you bastards," Riven muttered, watching the alien fleet with a mixture of loathing and grudging respect. "Let's see how you like fighting someone who can dish it out just as well as you can." The battle raged on, a chaotic dance of destruction and survival. The solar farm's defenders fired again and again, each shot a desperate plea to the universe that they'd survive another day, another hour. "Commander," Voss said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a lifeline, "we've got a problem." Riven sighed. "Of course we do. Wouldn't be a day at the office without one." "It's the aliens," Voss continued. They're trying to communicate." For a moment the room stilled, the weight of this revelation hanging heavy in the air. "Well, about damn time," Riven said, his grin a sharp edge against the storm. "Let's see what the bastards have to say for themselves." As the room scrambled to establish a link, the tension thickened, each tick of the clock a reminder of their precarious situation. Still, there was a flicker of hope, a minuscule, fragile thing, but enough to hold onto in the face of extinction. The screen flickered to life, revealing the alien commander, a blue-skinned being with too many eyes and an expression that could curdle milk. "Greetings, Earthlings," it said, voice as slick as oil. "We are the Xenoth and we come in peace." Riven raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms. "Funny way of showing it." The superlaser was a precaution, the Xenoth commander replied, its tone dripping with insincerity. "We simply wish to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Voss repeated, incredulous. "You start a war and now you want to chat over coffee." The Xenoth spread its hands, a gesture meant to convey innocence but only emphasized its alienness. "Misunderstandings happen. We propose a truce." Riven exchanged a glance with Voss, the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a judge's gavel. "All right," Riven said finally, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Let's hear your terms. But don't think for a second we're letting our guard down." The Xenoth commander nodded, its alien visage unreadable. "We understand. Let us begin. As the negotiations commenced, Riven couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just stepped into a game where the rules were rigged and the stakes were life itself. The future hung in the balance, a precarious tightrope between war and peace. But for now, they had time. Time to figure out if they could trust these aliens, or if humanity's last stand was just the beginning of an even darker chapter. The Xenoth's holographic image didn't flicker, nor did it freeze with buffering when Riven's expression turned from sarcastic amusement to seething irritation. "Negotiate," Riven repeated, as if tasting something unpleasant. "You really mean surrender, don't you?" The word negotiate appears to have different implications across languages, the Xenoth commander said, a slimy smile stretching across its too smooth face. "But in your case, it translates to submit or face annihilation." "Well, that's just peachy," Voss muttered, loud enough for the crew around him to catch but low enough to pretend it was an internal monologue. "Have any more of those due process speeches, Commander, or are we skipping straight to the fireworks?" Riven leaned towards the intercom, a reluctant anticipation simmering in his chest. "All right, Xenoth, what's the script here? Do I have to get on my knees, or is groveling done remotely too?" The Xenoth's expression remained uncomfortably serene. "Warlord Korak will address you directly." "Stand by." The room was silent but for the low hum of machinery and the occasional, nervous shuffle. Riven noted the tension written on every face, though many wore it with that special brand of human bravado that often resembled a smirk. It was the expression of people who knew they were probably screwed, but were determined to make the most of the screwing. After a brief pause filled with the sort of suspense that usually preceded life-altering bad news, the image flickered to show Warlord Korak himself, a towering figure of sinewy muscle and malevolent intent. His eyes, three too many for Riven's comfort, bore into the screen with the casual malice of someone who sees entire civilizations as mildly annoying spots on a windshield. "Earthlings," Korak began, his voice a gravelly rumble that seemed to shake the very atoms in the air. "You stand on the precipice of annihilation." "Well, at least he cuts to the chase," Voss said, pretending to adjust his uniform, which had never quite fit right since his last unauthorized escape from a court-martial. Riven stepped forward, arms crossed. "Warlord Korak, I presume." And here I was hoping for a sales pitch. Korak's gaze was unwavering, like a disappointed god who'd caught his creation smuggling office supplies. "Your weapons, ingenious as they may be, are a mere nuisance to us. Surrender and we may allow some of you to live." "Define some," Riven replied, his sarcasm a brittle shield against the encroaching fear. "Because picky genocides are so last century, the strong," Korak said simply, "those who can prove their worth." Riven resisted the urge to laugh at the absurdity of it all. "Let me guess, a talent show. I've been told I do a mean rendition of I Will Survive." Voss shook his head, leaning over to whisper, "Careful, Commander. You might overplay our only weapon, our sparkling personalities." Korak seemed immune to sarcasm, a flaw found in most despots and customer service representatives. "We will demonstrate our power," he declared, gesturing off-screen. As if on cue, an image appeared alongside the warlord, a video feed from one of Earth's lunar bases. It was a bustling settlement, or had been, moments before a blinding flash turned it into a smoking crater. The video cut abruptly, leaving behind nothing but silence and the smell of ozone from the overtaxed electronics. "Well, that's a real estate nightmare," Voss quipped, though his voice lacked its usual glib assurance. Riven felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle in his gut, an iron ball of pressure usually reserved for commanders facing impossible odds. "All right, Korak, you've got our attention. Now, are you going to tell us what you really want, or do we skip to the part where I tell you to eat vacuum?" Korak's chuckle was the kind that made skin crawl, a sound formed of contempt and cold amusement. "You Earthlings are entertaining. We require your resources, your planet's energy, its strategic position, and the pleasure of our company," Riven added dryly. "What a bargain! You will surrender, Korak continued, ignoring the barbs, or we will obliterate each and every one of your settlements. Riven glanced at Voss. Thoughts? Well, Voss replied, shrugging like a man with nothing left to lose. Surrender sounds like a plan if you're into that sort of thing. Personally, I'd rather go down swingin'. Riven nodded, the decision as clear as the dark void outside. All right, Korak, here's our counteroffer, go to hell. The alien warlord's eyes narrowed, the equivalent of a predator narrowing in on its prey. Very well, he said, his words final as a tomb's closing. Prepare to join the other remnants of your kind. The screen went dark, and with it the false sense of hope they might have clung to like a lifeline. Well, that went swimmingly, Riven said, turning to the crew. Looks like we're up to our necks in it now. You know, Voss remarked, for an end-of-the-world scenario, this is actually a bit of a letdown. I expected more fire, less paperwork. Riven chuckled despite himself, the familiar camaraderie in Voss's flippancy a balm against the rising tide of despair. All right, people, you heard the warlord. Let's show him why Earth isn't just some rock you can kick around. Mara's voice crackled over the intercom. Commander, we've got incoming. More ships all headed this way. Perfect, Riven said, his voice a mixture of determination and resignation. Load up the superlaser. We're not going down without a fight. The crew sprang into action, the control room a hive of frenetic energy and grim resolve. They knew the odds were stacked worse than a rigged card game, but it didn't matter. They had their orders, and more importantly, they had each other. You think we'll make it? Voss asked, half serious, as they watched the alien fleet draw closer. Riven shrugged, adjusting his stance to better see the incoming threat. Does it matter? We're here and they're there. Might as well make it count. Another alert blared, the sound shrill and insistent. Incoming fire, Mara announced, her calm professionalism barely masking the tension beneath. Shields up, weapons hot, Riven called out. Let's give him hell, folks. As the battle began in earnest, the solar defense array shuddered under the weight of its own exertions, the superlaser unleashing torrents of concentrated solar fury at the encroaching enemies. The alien ships, for their part, responded in kind, their energy weapons slicing through space with deadly precision. Well, so much for peaceful negotiations, Voss commented, dodging a stray spark as the array shook under another hit. Peace is for suckers and the dead, Riven replied, watching as the first wave of alien ships began to falter under the relentless assault. And we ain't dead yet. The battle raged on, a brutal ballet of light and sound, as humanity's defenders fought against the tide of alien invaders. Each volley from the superlaser was a testament to human ingenuity, each strike against the shields a reminder of their fragility. Commander, we're picking up something strange. Mara's voice broke through the chaos, an edge of urgency cutting through the static. Stranger than interstellar existential threats, Riven asked, eyes scanning the readouts. It's a signal, Mara continued, her disbelief echoing through the calm. Coming from the alien fleet. A signal? What kind of signal? Voss interjected, his curiosity piqued despite the chaos around them. Looks like coordinates, Mara said, but they're not directed at us. They're directed at the aliens. Riven frowned, his mind racing to keep up. Someone's giving them orders. From within their own ranks, Voss added, catching on. A betrayal, maybe, or a power struggle, Riven mused, a spark of hope igniting amidst the darkness. Either way, we can use it. How? Mara asked, as another explosion rocked the control room. We feed them misinformation, Riven replied, his mind already formulating a plan. Turn their own tactics against them. Voss grinned, a feral edge to his smile. Now that's a plan I can get behind. All right, Riven said, determination steel in his voice. Mara, work with the text to hijack that signal. Feed them coordinates that'll lead him on a wild goose chase. On it, Commander, Mara replied, already moving to implement the idea. The battle continued to rage, but Riven could feel a shift, a subtle change in the tide. It was a long shot, a gamble with stakes higher than any he'd faced before. But it was also a chance, a slim, desperate chance to turn the tables. Let's hope they fall for it, Voss said, as the first signs of confusion rippled through the alien ranks. "Hope's a four-letter word," Riven replied, watching the screens with bated breath. "But right now it's all we've got." The alien ships hesitated, a momentary lapse in their coordinated assault. Then, as if on cue, they began to shift, their formation fracturing as some ships peeled away from the main force. "It's working," Mara reported, her voice a mixture of disbelief and triumph. "They're taking the bait." "All right," Riven said, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "Let's show these bastards what happens when you underestimate humanity." With renewed vigor, the solar defense array unleashed its fury, the superlaser cutting through the alien ranks with merciless precision. The tide was turning, slowly but surely, as the defenders pressed their advantage. "Looks like we've got a fighting chance after all," Voss said, his voice tinged with newfound hope. "Maybe," Riven replied, his gaze fixed on the unfolding chaos. "But let's not count our chickens just yet." The battle raged on, each moment a precarious balance between hope and despair. But in the heart of the storm, amidst the fire and fury, humanity fought on, defiant, unyielding, and determined to survive against the odds. As the dust settled, Riven allowed himself a fleeting moment of relief. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they'd bought themselves time, a precious commodity in the face of annihilation. "All right," he said, turning to his crew with a weary smile. "Let's get to work. We've got an alien warlord to outsmart and a planet to save." And with that, the battle for humanity's survival continued, a desperate struggle against the encroaching darkness, with nothing but their wits and each other to see them through. Riven stared at the holographic display, the image of the alien fleet, an unwelcome guest hovering overhead. The room buzzed with activity, the kind that usually preceded a monumental screw-up or a brilliant success. The kind of energy you could bottle if it weren't for the constant threat of obliteration looming over their heads. "We've got to make sure this superlaser of Ior's doesn't just fizzle out like a cheap firecracker," Riven said, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 botched plans. He glanced at Lieutenant Jax Voss, who was casually leaning against a console like they weren't all one step from becoming space debris. "No pressure, right?" Voss replied, smirking. "Just Earth's survival on the line. You want me to grab a match and see if it lights?" "Funny," Riven replied dryly. "Mira, can we trust this thing not to blow us up with it?" Mira Voss, the tech genius and no relation to Jax, was hunched over a terminal, fingers blurring as they danced across the keyboard. She frowned, pushing a stray hair behind her ear. "With any luck, it might obliterate half the fleet without nuking us first," reassuring, Riven deadpanned. "Let's run some tests. Lion, coordinate with Mira to make sure this thing doesn't just turn us into a sunburn on Saturn's moon." Lion Vex, tactical maestro and fond of plans that didn't end in fiery death, nodded. "On it, Commander. But you know, if this goes south, I claim dibs on saying, 'I told you so,'" noted, Riven replied, studying the chaotic tableau of the control room. A symphony of beeping consoles and frantic engineers, each trying to outdo the other in the race to fix a problem before it became an obituary. Meanwhile, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a rusty butter knife. They were supposed to be the cream of the crop, Earth's finest. Instead, they squabbled like kids fighting over the last piece of candy. The kind of kids who'd seen too much and would probably use the candy to fashion a weapon. "All right, people," Riven called out, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Let's make sure this superlaser doesn't blow us into the next galaxy." "Mira, what's the status?" Mira, eyes glued to the screen, muttered something that sounded like a curse in binary. "We're looking at a 60% chance of not dying horribly." "Glass half full," Voss chimed in, his grin never wavering. "Or half full of ash, depending on how you look at it." "You're a riot, Voss," Riven said before turning to Lion. "What's our fallback if this thing doesn't work?" Lion shrugged, a gesture that somehow carried the weight of the world. "If it fails, we've got Plan B. Overwhelm them with paperwork and bureaucratic nonsense." I hear it's lethal in the right doses. Riven chuckled, the sound more a bark of exhaustion than amusement. If only we could weaponize that. As the test preparations continued, the control room grew quieter, the gravity of their situation sinking in like a lead anchor. This wasn't just a battle, it was a gamble, one where the price of failure was unthinkable. "All right," Mira announced finally, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "We're ready for a test fire." "Let's do it," Riven said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Everyone, brace yourselves." A quiet settled over the room, the kind of silence that usually precedes a disaster or a miracle. Riven watched the countdown, each number ticking away the last vestiges of doubt. 3, 2, 1. The superlaser fired, a brilliant beam of concentrated solar energy slicing through the void. It was beautiful in a way, the kind of beauty that takes your breath away before it turns into terror. "Woo!" Voss whooped, clapping his hands. "Would you look at that?" Didn't turn us into toast. Mira watched the readouts with a critical eye. "The targeting system's not quite calibrated. We hit the target, but it's not precise." "Which means?" Riven asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. "Which means it's less a sniper rifle and more a shotgun," Lion elaborated. "Effective but not exactly precise. Add it to the list of things to fix," Riven said, rubbing a hand across his stubbled chin. "But good work, everyone. At least we know it works without incinerating us first." A cheer went up from the crew, a mixture of relief and renewed hope. It wasn't a victory, but it was a step in the right direction. A small light in the vast darkness they found themselves in. "Now," Riven continued, his voice commanding attention, "we need to focus on our strategy. Lion, what's the latest from the other commanders?" Lion exchanged a look with Mira before responding. "Not great. Some think we should negotiate. Others want to fight. And a few are suggesting we just pack up and find a nice quiet planet to retire on." "Retirement sounds nice," Voss commented. "Assuming we don't retire 6 feet under first." Riven sighed, the weight of command pressing down like a boot on his neck. "We need to get them on the same page. I don't care if we have to threaten them with a trip to an HR training seminar." "Harsh," Mira said, smirking. "But effective." "Exactly," Riven said. "Let's remind them what's at stake. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for everyone back home." The crew nodded, the gravity of their mission grounding their resolve. In the face of overwhelming odds, they were still standing, still fighting. Because what else could they do? Give up? Not on their watch. They ran more tests, each iteration refining the superlaser's capabilities, each success a small victory in a war that had only just begun. As the hours passed, tension gave way to determination, a gritty resolve to face whatever came next with teeth bared and fists clenched. "Commander," Lion called out, snapping Riven from his thoughts. "We're receiving another transmission. It's garbled, but it's coming from an unknown source." "Put it through," Riven ordered, the familiar weight of foreboding settling in once more. The transmission crackled to life, a voice distorted by static and interference. "Help. Need assistance. Attacking." "Sounds like someone's in trouble," Voss noted, stating the obvious because sometimes the obvious was all they had. "Or it's a trap," Mira suggested, the cynicism in her voice a stark reminder of their reality. "Only one way to find out," Riven said, decision made. "Lion, get a fix on that signal. Let's see if we can't add Savior of the Universe to our resumes." As Lion worked her magic, Riven considered the possibilities. An ally, a trap, or something else entirely. Whatever it was, they'd handle it together. Because if there was one thing humans were good at, it was adapting. And if Riven had anything to say about it, they'd adapt all the way to victory or die trying. "Got it," Lion announced, breaking through his thoughts. "Looks like it's coming from a nearby sector. Could be another settlement under attack, or a stray dog looking for a home," Voss quipped. "Either way," Riven said, "we're not leaving anyone to face these bastards alone. Set course for the coordinates." The ship turned, engines humming as they altered course, a new objective in sight. The crew moved with purpose, a sense of camaraderie binding them together against the encroaching darkness. "Think we'll make a difference?" Voss asked, his tone more serious than usual. Riven considered the question, knowing full well the answer wasn't as simple as he'd like. "We'll make a difference," he said finally, certainty hardening his words. "Because that's what we do." The ship surged forward, a beacon of defiance in the boundless night. And as they hurtled toward the unknown, Riven couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope, a promise that maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way through this madness after all. And if not, they'd go down swinging, fists raised, laughter ringing in the void. Because when all was said and done, they were human. And humans never went quietly. "Let's get ready," Riven said, his voice carrying the weight of command and the fire of rebellion. "We've got a galaxy to save." The solar defense array buzzed like a hive of anxiety-ridden bees. The kind that had just discovered their honey was laced with dynamite. Riven Thorn stood in the middle of the chaos, staring at the holographic display that loomed above like a neon god. The alien fleet's trajectory was a line of doom, an interstellar checkmate that made chess look like tic-tac-toe. "Looks like our new friends are throwing a block party," Riven muttered, his voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that would give a cactus a run for its prickles. Lieutenant Jax Voss, ever the purveyor of gallows humor, leaned against his favorite console as if it were a barstool. "Hope they brought their own beer," he said. "We're fresh out of hospitality. We're getting a transmission from command," Lion Vex announced, her tone suggesting she'd rather be discussing anything other than impending doom. "Apparently they've got new intel, new intel." Riven's eyebrow arched in disbelief. "Let me guess, the aliens are here for Earth's scenic views and artisanal coffee close," Lion replied, a wicked grin on her face. "They want our resources. The usual, minerals, water, and probably our hopes and dreams for dessert." "Ah, the classic alien buffet," Riven mused. "And here I thought they just wanted a good old-fashioned invasion." "That's the problem," Mira Voss chimed in, not looking up from her terminal. "They're not just here to conquer, they're here to strip us bare." "Well, at least they're thorough," Voss chuckled. "I do appreciate a species that doesn't leave loose ends." "No kidding," Riven agreed. "But it means we've got to act." Any word from the higher-ups, Lion sighed, a sound that carried the weight of every bad decision ever made. "They're debating whether to fire the superlaser now or wait until the aliens start taking selfies with the Statue of Liberty." "Typical," Riven grumbled. "The only thing politicians are faster at than indecision is backpedaling." "Commander," Mira interrupted, her fingers pausing on the keyboard. "I'm picking up some anomalies in the superlaser's systems." Riven's face twisted into a scowl. "Define anomalies, Mira." "Sabotage, if I'm reading this right," she replied, her voice colder than deep space. "Someone's been tinkering with the targeting systems." A silence fell over the room as comforting as a solar flare. Voss whistled low, the sound of a man who'd just discovered a snake in his boot. "Sabotage. What is this, a bad spy novel?" "Worse," Riven said, grappling with the implications. "It's reality, and it means someone here isn't playing for our side." "Great," Voss sighed. "As if we didn't have enough problems." "Lion," Riven snapped, his mind racing. "We need to find out who's behind this. Start with anyone who's been acting twitchier than usual." "On it," Lion replied, already pulling up personnel files with the efficiency of a seasoned detective. "We also need to figure out how to fix this mess," Mira said, her fingers a blur on the keyboard. "I can patch some of it, but whoever did this knew what they were doing." Riven nodded, his brain a whir of calculations and strategy. "Do what you can, Mira, and do it fast. We need to be ready to fire when the decision comes." As Mira dove into the code like a surgeon with a scalpel, Riven turned his attention back to the screen. The alien fleet inched closer, their presence a ticking time bomb strapped to Earth's chest. "Maybe we should just send them a fruit basket," Voss suggested, his grin a beacon of misplaced cheer. "You know, show them we're the friendly sort. If by fruit basket you mean a salvo of photon torpedoes, I'm in," Riven replied, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Commander," Lion called, her eyes glued to her screen. "I found something." One of our engineers, Derek, has been accessing restricted areas, Derek. Riven frowned, recalling the man's sullen demeanor and too quick temper. Doesn't he owe everyone money and apparently allegiance too? Lion added, her tone laced with irony. Looks like he's our guy. Fantastic, Riven grumbled, rubbing his temples. Jax, take a couple of guards and bring him in. Nicely if possible. Define nicely, Voss said, already moving towards the exit. Gently if he cooperates, Riven replied. With enthusiasm if he doesn't. As Voss left to commit some light coercion, Riven turned back to Lion. How long until the fleet hits critical distance? Not long, Lion replied, her tone a grim forecast. And they'll bring the noise. Riven stared at the display, the weight of command a leaden cloak on his shoulders. Then we better hope Mira can work magic, he said, more to himself than anyone else. The room buzzed with tension and the low hum of desperate activity. If they didn't get the superlaser operational, Earth was on the menu, and not as the main course. Minutes ticked by, each one a lifetime. The buzz of the room became a symphony of stress, Mira's fingers dancing across her keyboard like a concert pianist on a caffeine high. Commander, she finally said, her voice cutting through the tension. I've patched most of the sabotage. The superlaser's functional, but it's not perfect. Imperfections are middle name, Riven said. Good work, Mira. Just then Voss returned, dragging Derek behind him, the man's face a mask of defiance and bruises. Caught him trying to ditch, Voss reported, unceremoniously dumping Derek at Riven's feet. Derek, Riven said, his voice a low growl. Care to explain why you've been tampering with our only shot at survival? The engineer spat, his expression a mix of fear and bravado. Better to join the winning side, he sneered. Smart move, Voss said sarcastically. Except for the part where we caught you. Riven's eyes bored into the man, weighing options like a butcher selecting the right cut of meat. Jax, lock him up. We'll deal with him later. As Derek was hauled away, Riven turned back to his team. All right, folks, we've got a sabotage superlaser, an alien fleet, and a bunch of bureaucrats trying to decide our fate. What's the worst that could happen? Funny you should ask, Lion said, her expression grim. We've got another transmission from command. They've made a decision. Let me guess, Riven said. We're rolling out the welcome mat. Not quite, Lion replied. They've decided to use the superlaser, but only as a last resort. We need to hold position and wait for further orders. Typical, Riven muttered. Wait until we're neck-deep in alien troops before hitting the panic button. Voss chuckled, shaking his head. Why make a tough call now when they can make it later under duress? Exactly, Riven said, turning to Mira. Keep the superlaser on standby. We might not have long. Got it, Mira said, her tone one of grim determination. As the room settled into a tense waiting game, Riven couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing chess with a blindfold on, against an opponent who had a cheat sheet. Commander, Lion's voice cut through the silence again. We've got movement on the alien fleet. They're amassing at the outer perimeter. Guess they've decided to make the first move, Riven said, feeling the first stirrings of adrenaline. All right, let's get ready for a fight. Lion, coordinate with the other ships. We need to be ready for anything. The crew snapped into action, the room a hive of disciplined chaos. Riven watched them, pride mixing with fear as he considered the stakes. If we survive this, Voss said, standing by Riven's side, drinks are on me. I'll hold you to that, Riven replied, his gaze fixed on the holographic display. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and probably out of their minds for even trying to stand against such odds. But if there was one thing Riven knew about humans, it was that they were stubborn as hell. All right, people, Riven said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. We've got a galaxy's worth of trouble headed our way. Let's show these aliens what happens when you mess with Earth. The ship hummed with readiness, a collective breath held as they awaited the first salvo. It was a moment suspended in time, the calm before the storm, the calm before they either made history or became footnotes in someone else's. As Riven stood there staring into the vast unknown, he felt a flicker of that indomitable human spirit. They might be facing an enemy beyond their comprehension, but they would do it together with sarcasm and grit, because that was what it meant to be human. And if all else failed, they'd go down swinging. Because in the end, it wasn't about surviving. It was about standing up, fighting back, and laughing in the face of oblivion. The control room was buzzing more than a caffeine-addicted hornet. Riven Thorn stood in the middle of it all, arms crossed, staring at the holographic display like it owed him money. The alien fleet loomed above Earth, a cosmic guillotine ready to drop. Sabotage, he muttered to himself, shaking his head. Why is it never something simple like a paper jam? Because life hates us, Voss replied, leaning against a console with the casual air of a man whose humor was the only thing standing between him and a breakdown. Commander, Lion Vex called, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chaos. Looks like the Xenoth just took out one of our primary defense satellites. They're not wasting time. Guess they are not fans of foreplay, Riven quipped, his eyes not leaving the display. Well, at least they are efficient, Mira Voss added, her fingers dancing across her keyboard, trying to squeeze every ounce of performance out of the compromised systems. Great, Riven sighed. Our death might be quick if not painless. Just then the holographic display flickered and the slimy visage of the Xenoth commander appeared. His smile was enough to make skin crawl like a used car salesman with extra tentacles. Earthlings, the Xenoth drawled, his voice like oil slick on a sewer. We are here to negotiate. Negotiate, Riven snorted. Is that Xenoth for surrender or die? Precisely, the alien replied, his smile widening unpleasantly. You have wisdom beyond your primitive technology. Thanks, Riven shot back, but we're not in the market for flattery. How about you save the sales pitch for someone who cares? The Xenoth commander's smile faltered, a testament to the fact that even intergalactic warmongers dislike being heckled. You will submit or we will strip your planet of all resources. Wow, Voss said, feigning awe. They even steal our cliches. Riven gave a half-hearted chuckle, his mind racing like a hamster on a wheel slick with Vaseline. We'll get back to you on that, he said, cutting the transmission before the alien could respond. So, Voss said, what's the plan? Besides praying and hoping someone upstairs hits the miracle button. Right now, Riven replied, we hold the line. Lion, any word from Earth's politicians? Lion rolled her eyes, a gesture so practiced it was almost an art form. They're still debating. Apparently the superlacer is too risky. Too risky, Riven laughed, a harsh bark. Like that's ever stopped them before. Looks like they're waiting for a sign from heaven, Voss said. Or hell, considering our luck. All right, Riven said, rubbing his temples as he tried to think past the headache throbbing behind his eyes. We need to get the superlacer online. Mira, can you? Already on it, she interrupted, her fingers blurring over the keys. It's a mess, but I'll do what I can. Do it fast, Riven said. Otherwise, we might be the ones getting laser etched into history. Outside, the Xenoth fleet moved with the serene menace of a shark navigating a nursery. Earth's defenses, crippled by Dirk's betrayal, were folding faster than a cheap card table. Satellites blinked out one by one, a deadly countdown to oblivion. Commander, Lion called, a new urgency in her tone. The Xenoth are targeting key cities, Chicago, London, Tokyo. Riven grimaced. Guess they don't want to miss the highlights reel. Typical aliens, Voss said. Can't just blow up a planet without making a spectacle. Riven, Mira called, her brow furrowed with concentration. I've managed to bypass some of the damaged circuits. The superlacer's operational, but it's still glitchy. Riven nodded. It's better than nothing. Get ready to fire on my command. Firing on a glitchy superweapon, Voss said, grinning. What's the worst that could happen? Exploding in our faces, Riven replied dryly. But at this point, it's a risk we have to take. Lion's voice cut through once more, a lifeline of grim news. Commander, the Xenoth are deploying ground troops. Our forces are stretched thin. Perfect, Riven muttered. How are the politicians taking the news? They're still debating, Lion replied, her voice dripping with frustration. Apparently, they're worried about civilian casualties. Civilian casualties, Riven exploded. We're about to become an alien Buffett and they're worried about bad press. Hey, at least they're consistent, Voss said, shrugging. Always thinking about the next election. Riven could only shake his head. All right, we need to buy more time. Get every available gun on the ground and in the sky. We hold them back until the superlacer's ready. As his team sprang into action, Riven allowed himself a moment of grim reflection. Here they were, humanity's last line of defense, held together by duct tape, sarcasm, and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd survive another day. "Commander," Lion's voice broke his reverie. "The Xenoth are making their move. They're hitting New York hard. We need to respond." "Understood," Riven said, his resolve hardening. "Let's give them a fight to remember." On the ground, chaos reigned. Xenoth troops, sleek and lethal, descended with terrifying precision. In cities that had once thrived with life, panic spread like wildfire. The aliens were quick, methodical, and utterly without mercy. "Get me a line to UN command," Riven ordered, his voice cutting through the din. Mira worked her magic, the connection crackling to life with all the clarity of a bad radio play. A chorus of voices erupted, each one more frantic than the last. "Commander Thorne here," Riven said, his tone a whipcrack of authority. "What's the plan, or are we winging it?" Silence, then a hesitant voice. "Commander, we're assessing options. This is a delicate situation." "Delicate?" Riven's laugh was a jagged thing. "I don't know about you, but I'm fresh out of kid gloves. We need authorization to fire the superlacer." "Firing the superlacer could provoke full-scale retaliation," the voice said, as though they weren't already in the thick of it. "Newsflash," Riven said, his patience thin as skin on a drum. "We're already facing that. We need to hit back and hard before there's nothing left to defend." Another pause, the kind that could kill hope. "All right, Commander, you have conditional authorization. Use your discretion." Riven closed the connection, a bitter taste in his mouth. "Discretion," he muttered, "as if we have any other choice." "Commander," Mira's voice pulled him back. "The superlacer's ready as much as it can be." Riven nodded, feeling the weight of the world press down. "All right, let's light it up." The room held its collective breath as Mira initiated the firing sequence. The superlacer, a testament to human ingenuity and desperation, roared to life with a bone-rattling hum. "Target locked," Mira announced, her voice steady despite the stakes. Riven took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. "Fire!" The superlacer unleashed its wrath, a spear of light lancing through space, aimed directly at the heart of the Xenoth fleet. It was a moment of pure defiance, humanity's punch back against the cosmos. For a heartbeat, time stretched, a rubber band pulled to its limit. Then the laser struck, a brilliant cascade of explosions ripping through the Xenoth ships. The control room erupted in cheers, a brief burst of joy amidst the grim battle. But the victory was short-lived. The Xenoth regrouped, their counterattack swift and merciless. "Commander," Lion's voice was a lifeline in the swirling chaos. "They're retaliating. We need to fall back, regroup." Riven gritted his teeth. "We hold our ground. This is our planet, and I'll be damned if we let them take it without a fight." "Sounds like a plan," Voss said, his grin as sharp as a razor. "Or at least a good way to go out swinging." "All right, everyone," Riven said, his voice a rallying cry. "We fight until we can't, for Earth, for each other." As the battle raged on, a grim determination settled over the crew. They were outnumbered and overpowered, but not outmatched in spirit. In the end, it was that spirit, that refusal to bow out quietly, that kept them going. In their darkest hour, they found strength in the struggle, humor in the hopeless, and a grim satisfaction in standing their ground. As the clock ticked down to Earth's fate, Riven Thorne stood at the helm, defiant to the last. Because if humanity was going down, they were damn well going down fighting, with a middle finger raised to the stars. The control room was a symphony of chaos, minus the violins. Mira and Lion were neck-deep in wires and screens, like two wizards trying to conjure a miracle from a hat full of broken technology. Riven watched, arms crossed, the lines of his face etched deeper than the Grand Canyon. "How's it looking?" Riven asked, a question that was less about systems and more about survival. "Like we tried to knit a sweater out of spaghetti," Mira shot back, not looking up from her console. Her fingers moved with the precision of someone defusing a bomb, which, given the state of things, wasn't far off. Lion, squinting through screens of data, let out a noise that was half chuckle, half sob. Good news is, I think I've found our saboteur. Bad news is he didn't leave a business card. Surprise, surprise, Voss muttered from his perch against a console, a dark smirk on his face. Betrayed by one of our own. Who could have seen that coming? Oh, right. Everyone. Riven rolled his eyes, an exercise in futility since no one was paying attention. Name? Derek, Lion said, spitting out the word like it tasted of ash. Slippery bastard's been feeding them intel for weeks, it seems. Can't say I'm shocked, Riven replied. Guy always had a face you wanted to punch. Mira snorted. In that case, he should have been our first suspect. All right, we'll deal with Derek later. Riven turned to the task at hand. Find me something useful, anything we can exploit. Lion's fingers danced over her keyboard, her eyes narrowed in concentration. You know, for aliens who are supposed to be the pinnacle of evolutionary design, they sure let their guard down. Her voice was laced with a cynicism that could cut glass. Spill it, Riven said, stepping closer, hope flickering in his chest like a lighter in a windstorm. They're ships, Lion explained. They're all about symmetry. It's like they are allergic to disorder. I bet if we hit them in just the right spot, we could cause a chain reaction. Voss whistled, long and low. So you're saying we poke him in the eye and they might just blink? More like a migraine, Mira added, her attention still locked on the screen. But first, we need to patch up this superlacer. It's like trying to run a marathon with a sprained ankle. Wouldn't be our first time, Riven said, rubbing the back of his neck where tension had built a permanent residence. Okay, let's focus. Lion, get me the coordinates of that sweet spot. Mira, get that laser looking less like a pyrotechnic accident and more like a weapon. As the team huddled over their consoles, Riven allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Here they were, humanity's last hope, trying to outsmart an enemy that didn't just have a foot up on the evolutionary ladder, but had set fire to the whole damn thing on their way up. All right, Riven said, addressing his ragtag band of heroes. We've got a plan, or something resembling one. Voss, get me a line to Earth's leaders. Time for a little chat. Voss saluted with a lazy flick of his wrist and punched the necessary buttons, the connection crackling to life with all the charm of an angry wasp. Moments later, a chorus of overly polished voices filled the room, each trying to out-importance the other. This is Commander Riven Thorn, Riven began, leaning into the microphone like a rock star about to drop a mic. We've got a plan to turn the tide, but it's going to require some, shall we say, unorthodox methods. A voice, all bluster and no bite, responded. Commander, what exactly are you proposing? Riven took a breath, channeling the patience of a saint he most definitely was not. Guerrilla tactics, hit and run with the superlacer. We've found a potential weakness in the Xenoth formation. We hit it, we might make them reconsider this little invasion of theirs. A beat of silence, then another voice, this one more cautious. And you're confident this will work? Define confident, Riven shot back, his sarcasm cutting through the static. Look, it's a long shot, but it's the best shot we've got, and frankly, I'm not in the business of handing out guarantees. Commander, another voice piped up, more serious now, we'll give you the support you need. But remember, Earth is counting on you. No pressure then, Riven muttered, closing the connection before any more platitudes could fly through. He turned back to his team, their faces lit by the glow of screens and the fire of determination. All right, people, he said, clapping his hands together. Let's show these Xenoth what happens when you corner the scrappiest species in the galaxy. The room buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose. For all their faults, humans had a knack for coming together when the chips were down, and right now, the chips were practically in the basement. The superlacer, a beast of a thing that hummed with barely contained energy, was their ace in the hole. And with Mira and Lion at the helm, Riven felt a flicker of hope that they might just pull this off. Days bled into nights, which bled into more days as Mira and Lion worked tirelessly to repair the superlaser. It was like trying to fix a leaky boat with duct tape and dreams, but they were getting somewhere. "Nearly there," Mira said, her voice tinged with exhaustion, but also with a fierce determination that could power the laser itself. "Just a few more tweaks and we're good to go." "Good," Riven replied, his eyes never leaving the holographic display where the Xenoth fleet loomed like a bad moon on the rise. "Lion, how's our target?" Lion grinned, the kind of grin that said she knew something the aliens didn't. "Ready and waiting. We hit them there and their whole formation could come crashing down like a house of cards." "Perfect," Riven nodded. "Voss, let's rally the troops. If we're going down swinging, and maybe, just maybe, we'll take them with us." Voss gave a mock salute, his irreverence a comforting constant in the storm. "Aye, aye, Captain," he said, a rakish grin plastered across his face. As the countdown to launch began, the weight of the moment settled over them all. They were standing on the precipice of either triumph or annihilation, and the only certainty was that they wouldn't go quietly into the night. The superlaser hummed ominously, its power building to a crescendo. Riven stood by, ready to give the order that might just change their fate. His eyes met Mira's, then Lion's, and there was a shared understanding, a shared resolve. "Fire," Riven said, the word carrying all the weight of a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. The superlaser unleashed its fury once more, a beam of light that cut through the void with the precision of a surgeon and the wrath of a god. It struck the designated target, and for a moment nothing happened. Just a moment. Then, like dominoes, the Xenoth ships began to falter, their perfect symmetry unraveling into chaos. It was a beautiful sight in a destructive, apocalyptic sort of way. Riven watched, a mix of awe and grim satisfaction settling over him. Earth's defenders rallied, seizing the opportunity to press their advantage. The Xenoth, so sure of their superiority, were now on the back foot. "Commander," Lion's voice was breathless with disbelief and hope. "It's working. They're falling back." "Good," Riven replied, his voice steady even as his insides twisted with adrenaline. "Keep the pressure on. We've got them on the ropes and I plan to keep it that way." Voss let out a whoop, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "Never thought I'd say this, but I love it when a plan comes together." The battle raged on, but now the tide had turned. Humanity, with its patched-up technology and indomitable spirit, was giving the Xenoth a run for their money. It was a sight to behold, a testament to what this ragtag group could achieve when pushed to the brink. As the Iors dragged on, the Xenoth continued to retreat, their fleet unraveling like a bad sweater. It was a hard-won victory, but a victory nonetheless. Earth had survived, if only for another day. As the dust settled, Riven looked around at his team, their faces exhausted but triumphant. They had done the impossible, and damn if it didn't feel good. "All right, everyone," Riven said, his voice carrying a mix of pride and relief. "We've given them something to think about. Let's keep it up and maybe, just maybe, we'll make it out of this mess alive." And with that they got back to work, their determination undimmed, their spirits unbroken. Because if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was refusing to go quietly into the night. And they had no intention of starting now. The control room buzzed like a hive of caffeinated bees. The superlaser was primed, the coordinates locked. Riven stood there, feeling more like a gambler on the last roll of the dice than a military commander. But hell, if Lady Luck was a cruel mistress, she was at least one he was familiar with. "All right, people," Riven barked, injecting his voice with a confidence he didn't quite feel. "This is it. We're putting all our chips on the table. Let's make sure the Xenoth remember the day they tried to take on humanity and got to boot up their collective asses instead." Mira glanced up from her console, eyes ringed with exhaustion but sparking with defiance. "Just another day in paradise, huh, Commander?" "Yeah, and paradise is a bit more on fire than usual," Riven replied, nodding at the holographic display where the alien fleet loomed, a menacing constellation of doom. "We hit them hard, hit them fast, and maybe, just maybe, They'll decide we're not worth the trouble. Voss chuckled darkly from his station. Nothing like a good threat of obliteration to get the negotiation juices flowing. Who knew peace talks could start with a bang? Riven grinned despite himself. Let's get this party started. As Mira worked her magic on the controls, Lion kept her gaze locked on the holographic display, her fingers dancing over the keyboard like a concert pianist on speed. I've got the coordinates locked, Commander. Just waiting for your go-ahead. Voss, Riven said, connect me to Korak. Time for a little heart-to-heart with our favorite alien overlord. Coming right up, Voss smirked, tapping a few buttons with lazy precision. The holographic image of Warlord Korak flickered into existence, eyes, too many of them, glimmering with an unsettling mix of curiosity and disdain. Commander Thorn, Korak's voice resonated through the room, rich with condescension. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? Riven leaned in, letting a slow, insouciant smile spread across his face. Just thought we'd check in before we rearrange your fleet. Call it courtesy. Korak's expression shifted, a hint of surprise tugging at his features. Bravado is a poor substitute for strategy, Earthling. Maybe, Riven replied, unfazed. But last I checked, we've got a laser with your name on it. How's that for strategy? Mira grinned, her fingers still flying over the controls. And once we fire, you might find yourselves in need of a few extra ships. Korak's eyes narrowed, calculating. You bluff. Do I? Riven asked, tilting his head. We hit that sweet spot and your shiny, symmetrical fleet goes tits up. We can keep playing this game or we can talk about terms. There was a beat of silence, heavy and charged. Korak's image remained stoic, yet the slight twitch in one of his many eyes betrayed a sliver of doubt. Good. Let him sweat a little. Interesting proposition, Commander, Korak finally said, his tone carefully neutral. What are your terms? Simple, Riven replied, his voice hardening. You leave and you don't come back. If you do, we'll send you home in a million little pieces. Korak's expression shifted to one of barely concealed anger. You overestimate your position, Commander. Riven shrugged, all nonchalance. Maybe. But are you willing to bet your fleet on that? Another pause, then Korak's shoulders seemed to relax, if only slightly. Perhaps there is room for negotiation. Riven grinned, the kind of grin that promised nothing but trouble. Glad to hear it. Now, if you'll excuse us, we've got a laser to fire, just as a friendly reminder of what's at stake. With a nod to Mira, Riven gave the order. Fire! The superlaser roared to life, a beast unleashed, its energy slicing through the void with terrifying elegance. It struck true and the Xenoth fleet shuddered, their symmetry dissolving into chaos. Ships veered off course, crashing into one another like a galactic car pileup. Korak's image flickered, and for the first time genuine alarm crept into his expression. This is madness. No, Riven replied, eyes cold. This is humanity. The room erupted in cheers, grim and victorious. Voss punched the air, whooping like a madman. That's what I'm talking about. Give that bastard something to chew on. Lion leaned back in her chair, a rare smile tugging at her lips. I have to say, it's nice to see them squirm for a change. Mira wiped a hand across her brow, looking at Riven with something akin to admiration. Looks like you called their bluff, Commander. Just doing what has to be done, Riven replied, though a small part of him basked in the rare praise. Voss, keep that line open. I want to hear them grovel. Voss obliged, and Korak's image snapped back into focus, his earlier bravado replaced with a wary respect. You have made your point, Commander Thorn. Let us discuss terms. Good choice, Riven said, crossing his arms, his demeanor all business. Here's how this is going to work. You retreat, leave Earth alone, and in exchange we don't vaporize what's left of your fleet. Sound fair? Korak hesitated, the gears visibly turning in his alien head. We shall consider your terms. Consider fast, Riven retorted, because we're not known for our patience. There was a tense pause, then Korak inclined his head, a reluctant nod of agreement. Very well, we will withdraw. Riven gave a curt nod. Pleasure doing business with you, Korak. Safe travels back to wherever you came from, and do remember, our hospitality is a one-time offer. With that, the connection severed, and the control room exploded into a cacophony of relief and triumph. "Did we just do that?" Mira asked, disbelief coloring her voice. "Damn right we did," Voss replied, slapping her on the back. "We just sent them packing with their tails between their legs." The victory was a heady thing, sweet and intoxicating, but Riven knew better than to rest on his laurels. "All right, folks," he called out, clapping his hands for attention. "We've won this battle, but the war's not over. Let's stay sharp, keep our gear in top shape, and be ready for whatever comes next." Lion nodded, her focus already returning to the data streaming across her screen. "We'll keep an eye on their movements, make sure they don't try anything funny." Mira stretched, a satisfied smile on her face. "And I'll make sure the superlaser is ready to go at a moment's notice." "Just in case." "Good," Riven said, feeling a swell of pride for his team. "Let's show the universe what happens when you mess with humanity." As the hours wore on, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away, Riven found himself in a rare moment of reflection. They'd done what no one thought possible, standing up to an alien armada and coming out on top. It was a hell of a story, one for the history books, or at least the bar. Voss sidled up, a mischievous glint in his eye. "You know, I'm almost going to miss trading barbs with Korak." "Don't get too sentimental on me, Voss," Riven replied, a smirk playing at his lips. "I'm sure there are plenty of other alien overlords out there waiting to be charmed by your unique brand of diplomacy." "Well, when you put it that way," Voss said, grinning. "Here's to more intergalactic misunderstandings and laser-induced negotiations." They clinked imaginary glasses, the gesture as irreverent as it was genuine. For now, Earth was safe, the threat abated, at least temporarily. As Riven glanced around at his team, exhausted but unbowed, he couldn't help but feel a rare flicker of optimism. They'd faced down the impossible and emerged victorious, proving that even in the darkest of times, humanity had a way of shining through. And if the universe wanted to test them again, well, they'd be ready. After all, there was nothing quite like a good fight to remind them of what they were capable of. "All right," Riven said, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Take a breath, get some rest. We've got a planet to protect and plenty more work ahead. But for now, let's enjoy this little victory. We've earned it." As the room began to quiet, his team settling into a well-earned respite, Riven allowed himself a rare moment of peace. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but for now, they'd carved out a small corner of safety. And that was enough, at least for today. The aftermath of the battle against the Xenoth felt like the awkward morning after a wild party, where everyone was hungover and trying to piece together what the hell happened. Earth had survived for now, and the solar defense array was a buzz of activity, though this time with a slightly less frantic edge. Commander Riven Thorn surveyed the control room, now quieter but still alive with the hum of consoles and the low murmur of his team. He felt like a gambler who just pulled off a miraculous win, only to realize that he'd have to keep playing the game. The universe was a cruel dealer, and the house always had a way of stacking the odds. "Looks like we've got some rebuilding to do," he said, tapping the console with a weary finger. Mira Voss, who was working on optimizing the compromised systems, glanced up with a cynical smile. "Rebuilding? More like trying to make this hunk of junk space ready again before the next pack of intergalactic bullies shows up." Lieutenant Jax Voss chipped in from his station, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Ah, the glamorous life of a defender of Earth. Fixing what's broken, patching what's leaking, and hoping no one notices we're held together by duct tape and sheer willpower. Riven chuckled, appreciating the gallows humor. "Yeah, but at least we're not dead. That's always a plus." Meanwhile, Lion Vex was busy monitoring any potential Xenoth activity. Her fingers, ever nimble, danced over her keyboard like a caffeinated spider. "Commander, I'm picking up chatter from other spacefaring civilizations. Seems like they've taken notice of our little show." Riven leaned over, peering at her screen. "Oh joy, the galaxy's gossip column is abuzz." "What are they saying?" Are we the new darlings of the cosmic ballroom? Lion smirked. More like the scrappy underdogs who just punched the school bully in the nose. I think they are impressed, or at least curious. Impressed and curious are better than hostile and invading, Riven said, standing straight. Let's see if we can turn that into something useful. The control room doors slid open with a soft hiss, and in walked a delegation of Earth's finest politicians. Riven's heart sank a little. Nothing killed a celebration like a bunch of suits trying to take credit. One of them, a particularly smarmy guy with too much hair gel, probably named something like Senator Slick, stepped forward with a grin that could sell ice to a Xenoth. Commander Thorne, on behalf of Earth's government, we want to thank you for your exemplary service. Riven plastered on his best insincere smile. Just doing our job, Senator. Glad we could help out. Slick's grin widened, oblivious to the subtle jab. Yes, well, your actions have opened new doors for humanity. Other civilizations are reaching out. They see us as formidable allies, huh? Jax murmured to Mira. More like they see we're the crazy ones willing to blow up half the neighborhood to make a point. Mira stifled a laugh. If we're allies, I'd hate to see what they consider enemies. The senator continued, undeterred by the sarcasm leaking from every corner of the room. We believe that with your leadership, Commander, we can negotiate beneficial alliances. Riven nodded, wondering how long it would be before the politicians decided to mess things up. Of course, Senator. We'll keep the peace talks laser-free this time. Excellent, excellent, the senator replied, clearly missing the sarcasm. I'll leave you to it. We're all counting on your continued success. As the delegation left, Riven turned back to his team. Well, folks, it looks like we're not just fighting for survival anymore. Now we're playing diplomats. Yeah, because that's what we signed up for, Lion muttered, rolling her eyes. Hey, if schmoozing with alien dignitaries keeps us from getting vaporized, I'm all for it, Jax said, leaning back in his chair. Besides, who doesn't love a little alien small talk? Just as long as they don't serve Xenoth hors d'oeuvres, Mira quipped, her fingers never stopping their dance on the console. Riven chuckled, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. They'd survived the immediate threat, but now they had to navigate the treacherous waters of galactic politics. It was like trading one headache for another. All right, team, he said, clapping his hands. Let's get this place back in shape. We'll need to be ready for whatever comes next, whether it's friends or foes. The Iors turned into days, and the solar defense array began to find its rhythm again. Repairs were underway, systems optimized, and defenses bolstered. Earth was slowly but surely picking up the pieces, determined to stand strong against the cosmic abyss. One evening, as the stars blinked in the vastness of space, Riven found himself on the observation deck, a rare moment of solitude. He stared out at the endless expanse, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. Jax joined him, leaning against the railing with a casual ease. Penny for your thoughts, Commander, Riven sighed, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Just wondering how long we can keep this up. We're a small speck in a big universe and it feels like everyone's gunning for us. Yeah, well, we've made it this far, Jax said, his tone surprisingly earnest. And if anyone can keep us going, it's you. Riven chuckled, appreciating the sentiment even if it was wrapped in a layer of sarcasm. Thanks, Jax. Let's hope we don't have to test that theory anytime soon. As they stood there, contemplating the stars and the future beyond, a message pinged on Riven's communicator. He checked it, eyebrows lifting in surprise. Looks like we've got an invitation, he said, showing the message to Jax. The Lurian Consortium wants to meet with us. They're offering an alliance. Jax whistled low. The Lurians. Aren't they the ones who use diplomacy like a weapon? Yep. They're good at it too, Riven replied, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Could be a good thing or a trap. Guess we'll find out, Jax said, shrugging. Either way beats sitting around waiting for the next invasion. Riven nodded, already strategizing in his head. All right, let's gear up and put on our best diplomatic faces. Back in the control room, Riven gathered his team, explaining the situation. Mira looked up, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "So, we're going from shooting lasers to shaking hands, pretty much," Riven said with a wry smile. "But let's not forget to keep the laser handy, just in case." Lion glanced up from her screen, her eyes sharp and focused. "I'll keep tabs on their movements. If they even twitch the wrong way, we'll know." "Good," Riven said, nodding to her. "Let's keep our enemies close and our allies closer." The meeting with the Lurian Consortium was scheduled for the following day. The team spent the night preparing, brushing up on Lurian customs and protocols. It was like cramming for a test they couldn't afford to fail. When the moment finally arrived, Riven, Mira, Jax, and Lion stood ready in the holographic chamber, waiting for the connection to establish. "Remember," Riven said, adjusting his uniform, "we're here to make friends, not enemies." Jax grinned. "I'll leave my sarcasm at the door. God help us," Mira muttered playfully. The holographic image of the Lurian representative flickered into view, a tall figure draped in flowing robes. Their face was inscrutable, like trying to read a poker player with a perfect game face. "Greetings, Earthlings. I am Envoy Calix, spokesperson for the Lurian Consortium." Riven stepped forward, projecting confidence. "Envoy Calix, an honor to meet you. I'm Commander Riven Thorn. Thank you for reaching out." Calix inclined their head, a gesture that could mean anything from respect to mild disdain. "You have caught the attention of many with your recent actions. Such boldness is rare. We aim to please," Riven replied, keeping his tone light. "And we're always looking to make new friends." "Indeed," Calix said, their gaze sweeping over the group. "The Consortium values alliances with those who can defend themselves. It's a dangerous galaxy, after all." "Tell us about it," Jax interjected, earning a sidelong glance from Riven. Calix continued, unfazed. "We propose a mutual defense pact. In exchange for your technological insights, we offer protection and shared resources." Mira's fingers twitched as if itching to type, but she kept her composure. "And what insights would you be interested in, Envoy?" "Your superlaser," Calix said simply. "Its effectiveness is intriguing." Riven nodded, understanding the leverage they held. "We'll need to discuss this offer, of course, but it's a promising start." "Very well," Calix agreed, their tone amiable. "We will await your decision." As the connection ended, Riven turned to his team. "Well, looks like we've got some thinking to do." "Think they are on the level?" Mira asked, skeptical as ever. "Hard to say," Lion replied, her mind already calculating potential risks. "But it's better to have allies than more enemies." Jax stretched, a yawn escaping him. "So, do we celebrate now or after we figure out if they're not planning to stab us in the back?" "Celebrate now," Riven said decisively. "It's been a hell of a ride and we've earned it." And so they did, raising imaginary glasses once more, toasting to survival, to victory, and to the unpredictable future that awaited them among the stars. As the night wore on, filled with laughter and the occasional sarcastic barb, Riven allowed himself to relax, if only for a moment. They had a long road ahead, but they were still here, still fighting and still together. Whatever the universe threw at them next, they'd face it head on. Because that's what humanity did best: adapt, survive, and kick a little ass when necessary.